We welcome Billy Liucci from TexAgs.com. He broke the story on Sunday morning that Jimbo Fisher was going to be fired. He has since been fired. $76 million buyout. Billy, you reported that this process of making the decision on Jimbo Fisher started at the Board of Regents meeting last week, a regularly scheduled meeting that happened to come after the loss to Ole Miss. Because I think people are confused, and I think I look at the timing of it. They drop a 50 burger on Mississippi State last night. Yeah. And then this happens. But after talking to you, I understand that Ole Miss thing kind of felt like a final straw.
Yeah, I think that stuck in the craw of a lot of people that were ultimately making the decision. And look, you set yourself up for that with the entire history, right? And I know it's tough. Connor Wigman was looking really good. I sat here with the SEC Network crew, and prior to that, and the whole day before, all we were talking about was how good Wigman looked, and where does he rate in the SEC with the quarterback pecking order. And it was early for that talk, but that's how he was looking, But there's a whole body of work around it. There's other quarterback injuries, and is that coincidence, or is that slow developing plays? Is that poor blocking schemes? I don't know, but you as the losses mount, as the average or below average seasons mount, then comes where your margin for error goes away. So it wasn't based on one game, but it certainly feels like we wouldn't be having this conversation today had they won. And I felt that way going in. If they win in Oxford, they are they're probably going to be 5-2 in the SEC, which we saw the difference between them and Mississippi State last night. 5-2 in the SEC, and they'll be on a four-game win streak heading into Baton Rouge in the season finale. And all of that with a backup quarterback. So I don't think we'd be having this conversation. I think when they lost that game, a lot of trends and statistics and records and road records, SEC records. They were 6-12 against Power 5 in their last 18. Those became overwhelming and undeniable. And if you tried to counter that at all, you just really couldn't, because some of those numbers were just overwhelming, and they spoke louder than anything that anyone on the other side of it could say. And Ole Miss, again, I think it just, Andy, what it did is it squashed any and all momentum. And I think any hope for momentum, let me say that. And I think the way that it happened, against Ole Miss and with the stuff between Jimbo and Lane Kiffin, it's not so much about that, but it's the whole concept of doing less with more.
Well, I thought the way
and Ole Miss is an example of the opposite, kind of. So that's kind of I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
I thought the way Lane framed it going into the game, like if I were someone who made decisions at Texas A&M or someone who wrote checks at Texas A&M, the way he framed it would really bother me. And it was when he said, well, their goal is to be bowl eligible, and we're aiming for bigger things. But he did that after saying they have all these great players. They have all this. It was like sticking the knife in. And
yeah, it was absolutely that. And all the more reason you needed to win. And I think people would have been really excited about that victory. Had that kick gone through and A&M won it in overtime, or had the defense gotten that, that stop there late, or A&M not thrown the pick early in the third quarter, there's a million ways they win that football game. And that's also, look, I don't know that I don't think anybody but me has made that connection with the Lane thing, but I just knew how pissed off everybody was going into that game and then coming out of it. But it was a narrow, tough, brutal loss that everyone knows they could have won. I would say should have. That was a hell of an SEC football game. So was A&M Alabama a few weeks earlier. I wouldn't say the same about A&M Tennessee. I think both of them were just slopping around out there for most of it. But those other two games were like, hey, toe-to-toe, let's go 4 quarters of really good football and see who wins, and it's going to come down to the wire. But that's been kind of the MO around here for a long time. And Jimbo, I said this the other day, and I believe this. He got A&M closer than anyone has, in recent history. RC had it there early in his tenure, and they won the Big 12 later in the tenure in 98, and then obviously Jackie Sherrill. But I'm talking about in the last 30 years or so, since their last conference title, so 25-ish years, Jimbo had them the closest to getting there. And by getting there, I mean a legitimate top 10 program, an SEC title contender for a stretch, a team that was going to win 10 games consistently. It felt like, Andy, they 9-1 Orange Bowl, top 4 finish, right in the playoff discussion, right to the end. Then the next year they lose Haynes King. They have a couple bad weeks. They come back, they beat Bama. They win like 5 in a row. They beat a number 11 Auburn team that comes in here. They're number 11 themselves going into Oxford, favored, and then favored 2 weeks later against a bad LSU team with Edo going out. There it was, back-to-back, New Year's 6, maybe a 20-3 or 21-3, 20-4 record in 2 years, whatever that bowl game was going to be. And they were putting together the number 1 recruiting class that probably, believe it or not, could have even been better had they won the. So you would have been talking about back-to-back top 10, if not top 6 finishes, a number 1 class. And I think more than anything, Andy, is you would have been talking about a culture change, because coaches, you've been a part of programs. Coaches can do all they want to try to change culture. It's never, I don't know that it's ever happened other than, hey, we got good kids and they're graduating. But I mean, like a culture of winning and a culture of a championship level expectation. I don't know that it's ever happened if you can't hit that run where you're winning games and it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And until you do that, you can only go so far before it starts to erode. And I think they hit that tipping point where they could have truly let that winner's mentality and mindset sink in, and they couldn't quite get over. And then Jimbo and that locker room were never able to get it back.
And then we get all the comparison to Kevin Sumlin's record, and it felt like it, like you said, eroded after that. Because you're right, if they beat Ole Miss in 21, if they beat LSU in 21, we are probably having a different conversation about Jimbo Fisher today. But now it did go downhill. They had that great recruiting class, but couldn't cash it in on the field. And I just wonder, at what point did the folks in charge say, yes, it's an obscene amount of money, but it's also an obscene amount of money next year. It doesn't ever stop being an obscene amount of money, so we have to do it right now.
I think in the last week, I really do. I mean, I think maybe the grumbling started after maybe a little bit after Miami. Some conversations started to be had like, hey, what if we have to do this? But I don't think that was going on too much after Bama. Maybe after Tennessee, people started talking, seriously about it. Mm-hmm. But I think in the past week is when, decisions were made and people went into those meetings knowing we know what we're going to talk about here. So everybody better be prepared.
And this is a very large amount of money. Obviously, the $76 million is what gets the headlines, but you have to buy out the rest of the staff. You may have to pay a buyout for the next coach. 25% of this is due within 60 days, the buyout. So that's $19-something million. Yeah, you're probably talking need like 25 to 30 million in cash, like right now. That is a huge decision for the Board of Regents, for the athletic department administration. How did they come to that decision?
Oh, I think there's levels here. There's the board, there's athletic director / president. Here at A&M, it's unique to the 12th Man Foundation because they're the fundraising arm. So I think there were probably a lot of conversations, and then maybe, Thursday was that one conversation where everybody at once was brought together and involved in it. So not an easy decision to come to, and say what you will. I said last year, if it wasn't for the contract, I think I told Dennis Dodd, I think A&M would have made a change. And I think doing it a year ago might have been a little premature. But now, 6 years in, that's how long Kevin Sumlin was here. It was hard to see it turning around, especially in today's day and age of the portal. I think people were looking at that going, man, this could get dicey in a hurry, because you had a lot of whispering going on, and you don't want to do anything based on what you predict's going to happen. I really don't like that. I don't like that form of leadership per se. But I think what was actually happening in the here and now and how it will affect the future, I think that was something that you had to really study. And I do think that statement aside, I do think that portal thing was lingering in a lot of people's mind.
What is the profile of the next Texas A&M coach? Is it a sitting head coach? Is it a hot coordinator? Does it matter if they've won a conference title? Because Scott Woodward, the former athletic director who hired Jimbo Fisher, had made it a priority to hire somebody who had won a national title. It feels like the criteria are a little more loose this time.
Dabo, let's go. No, look. That would be like
Ryan?
the one, right? Yeah. No, I don't think it's going to look like that this time around. And look, Scott Woodward, what does he have? What are we talking about here? Brian Kelly, Jimbo Fisher, Kim Mulkey. We know what Woodward.
He's got a
what
type.
Woodward does. And he definitely has a type. But Ross has a type too. It's different. You look at some of the coaches he's hired in the other sports. Sometimes he'll go off the beaten path, but it's also not going to be only Ross making this hire. It's just not. I don't think there's going to be I think A&M people have learned enough that it's not going to be meddling on the regents or donor level. I think it's going to be just more than just the athletic director making this hire. I don't know. I almost expect A&M to kind of get some support from a search firm on this one. I think there'll be a couple other people very respected outside of even the athletic department, brought in to kind of help with this search. And as is commonly the place at places, you want at least a little bit of a think tank without getting it too big where you can't keep a secret. But this is a real search, Andy. I don't think there is a type. Okay, so just pick a name of these high-end Jimbo types, like when A&M hired Jimbo, maybe not with a championship, but the biggest names that people will sit around a table, like when you and I sat there and mentioned Jimbo, and people are like, you guys would never be able to hire Jimbo from Florida State. So if one of those guys expresses interest, A&M can pass the hat and they can go get the money and say, we can't get that guy unless do you want to pay his buyout? Because if you do, we'll fund the contract, but the buyout money. So I do think one or two of those will pop up where it'll be at least intriguing, those biggest of the big names, kind of what I think people around the country think they're going to expect A&M to do again. So I'm not saying they can't go up there, but it has to be if they truly think somebody is attainable. And right now, I don't see that name. So
you do have a former roommate who got into coaching.
Yeah, Dan Campbell. A lot of people say go get one of the Dans, Dan Campbell or Dan Lanning. One of them's got a $20 million buyout. The other one's got the Detroit Lions on a potential potential Super Bowl run. So I know I looked up his salary. It's only it's $4 million.
Listen,
but
you got to try, right?
You do, and look. I think they'll reach out to. You make the list, and I bet they'll reach out to him. But Dan, I just knowing him, I think he's so loyal. He's so loyal to the Lions gave him a chance, and when other he's interviewed for several jobs, and the Lions gave him a chance, and he's kind of ingrained himself in that city, and they're doing special things up there. And I don't know why I'm sitting here making a pitch for it not to be him. I'm just telling you why I think that would be.
I just think it's
a
great
much
that you
longer
guys.
shot.
I think it's great you guys have the same coffee order. So
Yeah, you know what? Today I need it. I did text him a picture the other day. Hatfield from Metallica, they were playing this weekend in Detroit. And I wanted to get Metallica through a connection. I wanted to get them to go to practice. And I was like, I'm going to show up with Metallica at the Lions practice, unannounced. Like, I'm going to plan it through the band and through the Lions and through, Holly, Dan's wife. And I'm like, I'm going to set this up. And I'm going to literally walk into his office, and then behind me is going to be, the whole crew. Hatfield, Lars, Trujillo. We're going to go in there and just show up at practice. We're going to have how the teams have the camera. In my head, it sounded great. And then I saw the concert schedule, and it was like, okay, that's a game week at home at Kyle Field. It's going to be tough, but we could maybe do it. And then I saw the other part of it, and it was Detroit on the West Coast. And it's like, ugh. So I did send him the picture of Hatfield he posted a picture on his Instagram pointing at Dan's office door saying he wished he was there. So that pretty much made his life. But yeah, I think coaching the Lions right now is making his life. He's very, very happy with it. So, but yeah, I mean, who is it? I also could see A&M looking in a completely different direction in terms of how this ends up. You look at names like, Jeff Traylor at UTSA, that'll come up a lot. I think, one that's definitely going to come up, and he's absolutely going to be one of the candidates and one of the people that A&M takes a long, hard look at is someone else I'm familiar with, as are a lot of people here, and Mike Elko at Duke.
yeah.
And what he's done there in 2 years. And, Elko, to me, this is the way I describe him, because you mentioned coordinators. Like, do you go look at, in Athens, Georgia, at their young defensive coordinator who's making a name for himself? Yeah. Do you look that way? Do you do you look at high price? Do you go look at what DeBoer's doing at Washington? I think that would cost you a cajillion dollars. Mike Gundy at Oak State. People were talking about him a few days ago, and then what happened yesterday. But I think, that's a weird direction. It feels like there's a bunch of names that come up where you go, huh? Elko's one of them, though. That Elko and Traylor are a couple that I think you have to take a long look at. But I think there's also going to be some of those unexpected names. Like Andy, I'm just all over the place with this. Like, you go look at I'm just thinking of somebody that's been a coach for a while, like a Chip Kelly, or like somebody that
when Brian Kelly took the LSU job, we didn't know he was available, but he was available.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I could definitely see this job drawing somebody like that because it obviously can pay well. The resources are good. You're near a bunch of really good recruits, so it has all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, yeah. And let me tell you this. What I was going to say about Elko. You talk about coordinators and stuff, right? I don't feel like there's more than one, maybe two, right now, that are something. You name all these really successful coordinators that have stepped up. Well, Lane Kiffin had been head coach at USC and Tennessee. Steve Sarkisian had been a head coach at Washington and USC, and both of them had won national titles calling plays for Nick Saban. Bob Stoops, everyone knew. You were down there. Everyone knew Bob Stoops was a star. It's just a matter of where, not when, or where, not if. Brent Venables, we all knew, was just waiting on that right mega job. Who's another recent coordinator that Lincoln Riley was sitting there
when he got promoted.
Freeman was sitting there at Notre Dame. There's nothing really. Kirby Smart was just biding his time for Georgia at Alabama. Could have had 80 jobs in the interim. To me, Elko actually, if you're thinking of where's that coordinator, ain't too bad A&M doesn't have that groomed up from within. That's Mike Elko. The bonus is, oh, by the way, he got to go through the ropes of being a head coach at a Power 5 program for a couple of years if you were able to get him. So to me, he kind of is a multi-category. To quote one of my, I don't know if you've ever seen Summer of Sam, and they've got the list, or they're trying to see who the killer is. And this one guy, he said, he's a multi-category. Put him on the list. Elko's a multi-category. So anyway, there's going to be a
make
lot
that
of
particular connection if you wanted to get hired. But no,
it's a good movie.
Exactly. Well, Billy Liucci, thank you so much, and we appreciate it. And when we come back, I will give you, in honor of the 12th man, a dozen potential candidates for the Texas A&M.
Oh, wow. I got to listen. I got to listen to this one.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples On 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.